Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Larry Parks Show. I'm Larry Parks, and tonight we're so very pleased and honored to have as a guest Chris Powell. Chris is the managing editor of the Journal-Inquirer, a daily newspaper in Manchester, Connecticut, and secretary-treasurer of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, sometimes referred to as GATA. Together with Bill Murphy, Chris co-founded GATA in 1999 to expose the rigging of the gold market by Western central banks and their investment bank agents. He writes a political column published in newspapers throughout Connecticut and the Providence Journal in Rhode Island. He also edits the GATA Dispatch, that organization's daily electronic newsletter. Chris, thank you so very much for taking the time to come on the show.
I'm delighted to be here,
It's a
Larry.
great honor. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about GATA before we get started?
Well, we were founded out of suspicions that the gold market was being rigged. Our chairman, Bill Murphy, is a former futures trader. He began an internet site, lemetropolecafe.com, back in late 1998, covering the gold and silver markets in large part. And he began to notice some very strange activity. It seemed like the gold price and the silver price were getting pounded down by the same parties every time a critical price level was reached. I bumped into his internet site. I realized that what he was observing was very likely against antitrust law, with which I had some familiarity, and I told him that instead of just complaining about it, somebody ought to do something about it, and if somebody wanted to start a committee to try to get some lawyers to sue the bastards, I would contribute $500, and he thought that was a good idea, and so we incorporated GATA in Delaware in January 1999, and within a couple of years of collecting documents and looking things up in history, we began to realize that this was not your typical price-fixing scheme by private companies. This was basically government policy that was being carried out secretly through intermediaries.
Government policy just in America, or government policy all over the world?
Well, I'd say it's certainly government policy in the Western world. It used to be out in the open. The London gold pool was a coordinated scheme of gold price control that was done in the open, masterminded by the United States, the United Kingdom, and I guess 6 or so of its allies in Western Europe, operated throughout the 1960s to control the gold price through the coordinated disordering of Western central bank gold reserves, but it collapsed in March 1968 because they were running out of gold, trying to hold the price at $35 an ounce when inflation was exploding in the world and there was just too much offtake for them. So Western central bank and government price control of gold is an old story. It's just it used to be done honestly in the open. Now it's done surreptitiously through intermediaries.
Now that business with the London gold pool, that was really in connection with the Bretton Woods agreements. And tell our viewers about that.
Yeah, well, the Bretton Woods agreements back in 1944 basically made the U.S. dollar the world reserve currency and fixed the U.S. dollar gold price. But eventually the United States government realized that it didn't have to keep the dollar good as gold if people just pretended that it was good as gold, and it kept issuing more and more dollars, which began flooding the world, and the imbalance between the amount of dollars in the world and the amount of gold in the world finally broke the London gold pool in March 1968.
And that was at a time when it was still a felony for Americans to own gold.
Yes.
But really this had to do with the fact that foreign governments and foreign central banks could redeem. And so, I think what I hear you saying is that they had it in their minds, and they actually did attempt to fix the price of gold at that time by coordinating buying and selling.
Yeah, and it was done in the open. And I would maintain if they want to do it in the open today, well, go ahead, but at least let the world know that you're rigging the market. People don't realize, Larry, but the United States government is specifically authorized by the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, as amended through the 1970s, to rig not only the gold market in secret, but as the act has been amended in the 1970s, the United States government, the Treasury Department, through its Exchange Stabilization Fund, is now authorized to trade secretly and rig any market at all. It's an amazing totalitarian power, but if you look at the U.S. Treasury Department's internet site and look for the page about the Exchange Stabilization Fund, you'll find that the government is fully authorized to rig every market in secret. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, some documents that are on file with the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission came out. One is a filing by the CME Group, which is the operator of the major futures exchanges in the United States. It disclosed that the CME Group is offering volume discounts to central banks for trading in futures on the U.S. exchanges. This is unprecedented. It's news. The central banks are trading secretly in the U.S. futures markets, but you can't get the press to report this. And then the 10K statement of the CME Group that was filed this year with the Securities and Exchange Commission disclosed that among the CME Group's customers are central banks and governments. To me, this is an explosive story. This is a confirmation in documents with the U.S. government that are on the CFTC's internet site that central banks are now surreptitiously trading in all the major futures markets, which is to say now there are no markets at all. This is central bank price rigging of every financial instrument and every commodity, but you can't get it reported.
It's kind of scary, you know, in a way. This has to do, in my mind, with wealth transfer from ordinary people to the banking systems. And really what you're talking about is a collusion between the banking systems and the central banks in order to profit off the backs of ordinary people. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah, I think so, Larry. I argue that the revolving door between the government and the major investment banks makes you wonder whether there is a difference between the banking industry and the government. I mean, does the chairman of Goldman Sachs ever really know whether he's working for Goldman Sachs or if he's Treasury Secretary today? These are all the same people. They go back and forth between the industry and the government, and the government, as a result, is not working for the people. It is working for the banking industry. The objective of the government is really to maintain the profitability and the political dominance of the banking industry, I'm afraid.
I think that's right. In fact, we had a guest on the show maybe about a month ago. His name is Charles Calamoris. Do you know who he is?
No.
He's at Columbia, and he and another professor, a guy named Stephen Haber, wrote a wonderful book. It's called Fragile by Design, and he talks in the book about what he calls a grand bargain between the politicians and the banks in every country. And I had said to him that if I had to title that book, I'd call it Dishonest by Design, and I'd call that cooperation between the banks and the politicians a giant criminal conspiracy. Does that ring right to
Yeah,
you?
I think it's fair. Morally, I think it's repugnant, Larry. But the more my organization looked into this market rigging scheme in gold, the more we realized that this is just history. Manifestations of this conflict between the producing class and the financial class have been going on throughout history. We've just stumbled onto another one here, and I hope we someday can get the producing class to understand how it is being abused by the financial class and get our free markets back.
We can talk more about that, but first tell our viewers, in your view, why do central banks bother with gold? I mean, let me just add something to that. Officially, they've gotten gold out of the monetary structure. So they modified the IMF Articles of Agreement in 1978 to prohibit member countries from linking their currencies to gold and only to gold. So now that it's out of the monetary system, why are they doing all this manipulation?
Because gold is, and they know it is, money. It remains money. Maybe here in the United States we've forgotten all about it, but certainly in India, Asia, Middle East, those people know that it's money and they treat it as money, and it is always susceptible to be treated as money again. Since it is money, and potentially it is money for more people, it is a competitive currency. It competes with the currencies issued by central banks. Further, the academic literature that's available, including a long paper that was co-written by Larry Summers, who became Treasury Secretary after he wrote this paper while he was economics professor at Harvard. The academic literature shows that there is a long relationship between the gold price and the value of currencies and interest rates. Typically, the there's an inverse relationship between real interest rates and the gold price. Governments want interest rates to be low. They want bond prices to be high. The academic literature says, well, you need a low gold price for the interest rates to be low, or a high gold price rather, if interest rates are going to be low against a market price. Gold really is a determinant, Larry, of currency values and government bond prices. That's why central banks hate gold, because it's a restraint on their power. If people can escape to gold as a better currency, then the central bank currencies will not be in demand. Interest rates will rise. Government currency values will fall. Central bank power will decline. This is a conflict over power. Gold is potentially the people's currency. Central banks, governments don't want that. Central banks and governments want to be able to control all prices in the economy.
Well said. The way we explain it on this program, we talk about wealth transfer. And we see the wealth transfer going from ordinary people who produce things to the commercial banks, to private banks. And from our point of view, we see that gold really stands in the way. And so banks, when they leverage up, they make a lot more money. With gold as money, they can't leverage up. Would you buy into that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, gold's virtue is the restraint it puts on the financial system. The idea about gold is that, well, it is finite. It is much more finite than government currency. Well, governments have found a way to destroy that finiteness. They issue gold loans and gold swaps, and they've basically created a virtually infinite supply of what is called paper gold in order to destroy gold as a finite form of money. The world now thinks it has probably 100 times more gold than it really has, because central banks have been, backstopping this paper gold system. That is the virtue of gold. It is finite. It cannot be increased in supply as readily as government currencies can be increased in supply. People can resort to it when they think government currencies are being debased. It is the deadly enemy of central banking, of government irresponsibility. I would argue, I go so far, Larry, as to argue that suppressing the gold price is the foremost objective, and long has been the foremost objective of U.S. government foreign policy and U.S. government monetary policy.
I think that might be right. And one of the things that we've noticed is one of the guys who's an icon in America in investing, who's not a friend of gold, points out the perils of the paper money, and that would be Warren Buffett. And so in his 2012 Berkshire Hathaway report, he talks about how currency-denominated instruments, he's talking about bonds, are the most risky, the most dangerous places where you can put your money. And really what really points to that danger is gold. Is that something you'd agree with?
Oh yes, gold is really the barometer for the whole financial system. It is the measure of all currencies. It's the measure of government bonds. It's the measure of solvency of governments. I mean, that's really the reason it's got to be suppressed. It really is a guarantor of freedom. It is the currency that people should be able to resort to when they don't trust other currencies. The objective of Western central banking, and I think Western Treasury departments, long has been to withdraw that option from the population, to keep people prisoners of the government monetary system.
Now, I would say they did it in order to enhance, I think the banks did it in order to enhance bank profits, not to keep
it certainly gives the banking industry carte blanche to do whatever it wants, to create infinite money, infinite credit, infinite financial instruments that can swindle people out of their labor. No question about that.
And I have a clip, I've played it on this program, you may have come across it, from Dick Durbin, the majority whip, and which he says the banks own the Congress.
Well, they do own the Congress, but
But he's the majority whip.
If Senator Durbin thinks that, I wish I could get him to write a letter to the Fed and the Treasury Department simply to extract from the Fed and the Treasury Department a candid explanation of the U.S. government's policy toward gold and the gold market and the market interventions that are happening every day according to these documents now we have from the CFTC and the Securities and Exchange Commission. If Senator Durbin is really sore at the banking industry, all he has to do is write 1 or 2 letters demanding this information from the Fed and the Treasury Department, and the system will change.
Well, he is not sore at the banking industry, and he's one of the people who they own.
Yeah, he probably is owned.
And not probably, absolutely. I mean, he heads the Senate Banking Committee, and he has been one of the major recipients of campaign contributions from them. And all he's doing is saying what is. I have the clip, by the way, of him saying that. And in his new book, Robert Kaiser has been on this program. He has a book called The Act of Congress, and it's about the Chris Dodd-Frank bill, and he also quotes that line from Dick Durbin in that book. I mean, Durbin just came out with it. It's not like he laments it. He's just saying this is what it is, and he's not going to do something about it. How can you prove you've done? Let me rephrase that. You've done a lot of work at GATA, actually presenting evidence of this manipulation. Talk to our viewers a little bit about that evidence.
Yeah, really, it's the most important stuff we do, Larry, is we simply collect and publish and publicize and clamor about the official documentation we've obtained of Western Central Bank intervention surreptitiously in the gold market. We have admissions from many central bankers, including 4 former chairmen of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the former president of the Bank for International Settlements, Jelle Zylstra, who was also simultaneously head of the Netherlands Central Bank. We have statements by the former official of the Bank for International Settlements, William R. White, who gave a speech in 2005 saying that rigging the gold price was one of the primary objectives of central bank cooperation. We have the secret staff report of the International Monetary Fund from March 1999, which reported that Western central banks wanted to conceal their gold swaps and leases because disclosing them honestly in regular accounts would impair their secret interventions in the gold and currency markets. We have the PowerPoint presentation that the BIS gave to prospective Bank for International Settlements gave to prospective central bank members a few years ago. It advertised its services. Among the services being advertised to potential members by the Bank for International Settlements was secret intervention in the gold market. We have their PowerPoint presentation on our internet site.
Tell our viewers the internet site so they can go.
Oh, it's gata.org. And if you go into the left column of the internet site, you'll find a section called the Basics, which has a summary of the gold price suppression scheme and its purposes. And then you'll see another section called Documentation, which is where we have kept all these government documents and interviews and records from lawsuits which confirm that Western central banks are rigging the gold market every day. This is not what it's called. This is not conspiracy theory. This is all official record. Many of these documents are obtained from government internet sites, and they're still there. It's just amazing to me, Larry. This thing is it's a very simple journalism project. I mean, I have some aptitude for it because I've been in the newspaper business for, I don't know, 45 years or so. This story is available. Anybody who wants to look at the documentation and wants to put a few very specific critical questions to central banks. For example, you could ask the Bundesbank, can we see the record of your gold account at the Bank for International Settlements? Have you had any gold swaps with the United States or any agency of the U.S. government? Put the same question to the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department. Let me see your record of your gold accounts with the BIS, record of your gold swaps. The Federal Reserve admitted it had during our Freedom of Information litigation against the Fed. If you put specific questions to central banks about their intervention in the gold market, they'll tell you to drop dead. They will resist giving you that information. The actual location and disposition of Western Central Bank gold reserves, Larry, is a far more sensitive secret than the plans for the production of nuclear weapons.
You know, it's just remarkable. First, I want to take a moment just thank you for all the good work you've done over a very long period in putting all this together. I mean, you've done a tremendous service for people all over the world. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That's what we do.
On the BIS, we did a program on the BIS, relied a lot on a book. It's called The Tower of Babel. You know that book?
No. But they do have this tower in Basel,
that's right,
Switzerland, which is
Tower
their
of
headquarters.
Basel, right. And one of the things that turns out about the BIS is that they have sovereignty. Sovereignty. It's like their own little country, and they don't have to answer to anybody. When they built the new building, they put redundancy into the fire suppression system, so in case of a fire, the Swiss fire department wouldn't come in the building. So, and they're very proud of the fact that all their records are secret. I mean, they make a big deal about that. Let me switch gears for a minute. One of the groups that have directly suffered immensely from this business with the gold manipulation are the gold producers. And in the last couple of years, their market cap as an industry has gone from about 500 billion. Today it's about 130 billion, give or take. They could go under the waves. How come they don't react? How come they haven't led the way in doing something about all this gold manipulation?
Well, I can give you two reasons, Larry, why it's very hard for them to do it, though I would argue they really ought to do it because it's just a question for them now whether they want to die on their knees or die on their feet. But I think it's two things. First, no industry is more vulnerable to government regulation and expropriation than the mining industry. The mining industry relies on government for its mining permits, its mining claims, its mining patents, for enforcement of environmental regulations, for royalty requirements. Any government can shut down any mine in an instant on any pretext, whether it's royalties or mining patents or environmental regulations. The industry is totally at the mercy of the government. Secondly, it's the most capital-intensive industry in the world, which means that you probably can't build any significant mine for anything less than several $billion. Well, that requires you to get financing through the major world investment banks, which are very openly and formally agents of the central banks and part of the banking industry, which does not want the restraint on the financial system that gold would impose. So when I ask a mining company to support the publicizing of the Western Central Bank price suppression scheme, I'm kind of asking the mining company to slit its own throat because it will offend the government, it'll offend its bankers. And the mining industry is really impotent when it comes to this. On the other hand, as you noted with the collapse of the valuation of the mining industry, if a piece...
We just took gold mining.
Yeah, well, of the gold miners, but if a piece of paper that says gold on it, issued by an investment bank and presumably backstopped by the implicit credit of a central bank, is as good as a real piece of metal, nobody needs the mining industry. If investors are happy to accept a piece of paper as equivalent to gold, well, then the mining industry, the gold mining industry, can just fold. And that, I think, that brings the issue outside the mining industry itself. That brings the issue to investors. This gold price and really silver price suppression too will end only when investors refuse to accept paper for metal. But as long as people are willing to accept pieces of paper as equivalent to metal, well, paper is infinite.
Sure. On this program, we've done programs on how that people can protect their pensions, protect their savings, and we've always told them to buy U.S. and silver gold eagles, actually gold eagles, not silver eagles, and we emphasize that they should take delivery, meaning take possession, and for the reasons that you're saying. You folks at GATA, you've done some work on the leverage, the papal leverage in the gold market. Why don't you talk to that issue?
Yeah, this is, the great disparagement about gold in the last decade or so, Larry, has been that even with its substantial price appreciation from like about $260 in 1998 to $1,200 or so today, and it's been up to $1,900. Even with that price appreciation over the last decade or so, gold has not kept up with the consumer price index. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason for that was the development of the whole gold paper system, the issuance of infinite certificates to gold that doesn't exist. That is what has suppressed the price. There was testimony to the hearing of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission a couple of years ago that this leverage of paper to real metal approaches 100 to 1. I think about a year and a half ago, the Reserve Bank of India did its own study and estimated the ratio of paper gold to real metal at 92 to 1. Well, that suggests to me that the real price of gold, if the imaginary paper gold was taken out of the equation, would be something like 92 to 100 times greater than what it is today. Now, I do think there's hope for the gold industry. I do think there's hope for gold as a currency. I do think there's hope for humanity to get the opportunity to exit the fiat money system when it decides that the fiat money system is not being responsible. But I'm afraid that hope is in Asia right now, because this issue is totally suppressed in the Western financial press.
It reminds me of the Gold Reserve Act of 1900, where they said that the backing for the dollar, and I don't go along with any of this, I'm just repeating what they did, it was 40%. And now you're talking about, it's not even backing for it, not even the dollar, but really for stuff that promises gold. You're saying that there's not even 1% gold behind it.
Well, it's a fraction of the paper gold out there. We don't know exactly. I mean, we're just comparing the trading volumes on the futures exchanges. We're noting what the experts told the CFTC, what the Reserve Bank of India said, but the ratio of real metal to paper claims on gold is enormously wide. It's probably 50, 60, 70 to 1. Eventually, Asia is going to pull the plug on this. Asia is developing its own gold exchanges right now. The Russian,
China in particular.
Yes, China in particular. A Russian central banker back in 2004 gave a speech at the London Bullion Market Association meeting at the Kapinski Hotel in Moscow. The only words in English he spoke were Gold Antitrust Action Committee. We finally got a hold of his speech. He was telling the London bankers that Russia was on to them, that they knew that the Western central banks were suppressing the gold price, and this was against the interest of Russia as a commodity-producing country. The government-controlled press in China for years has been full of commentaries about gold price suppression by Western central banks. Asia knows about this. It can get into the press in China. We've posted many reports from the Chinese media about Western gold price suppression on our internet site. It simply cannot be reported in the West.
Unbelievable. You know, one of the big losers, I want you to talk to this on this gold suppression, has been the continent of Africa, and particularly Republic of South Africa, and particularly the so-called highly indebted poor countries, where gold is an important part. How come these countries, which are sovereign and theoretically could bring cases or whatever, how come they haven't complained about this gold suppression?
Larry, I think it's the treason of the central bankers. A lot of the central banks in these developing commodity-producing countries come out of the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund is an agent of Western imperialism. I mean, this whole gold price suppression scheme is the primary mechanism of imperialism today. This is the treason of the central bankers. The treason is most extreme, as you suggest, in countries like South Africa. I was in Suriname in February trying to explain this to people. The Suriname central bank chief is a former IMF official. Well, I was trying to make trouble for him down there. Suriname is a big gold producing country. The IMF wants to demonetize gold and keep the gold price down. And the Western central banks control, I guess, the appointment of the central bankers in the developing countries. But, you know, my group has made this point in South Africa many times.
You had a conference down there, I
yes,
remember.
we did. And I cannot understand for the life of me why South Africa has not risen up as one to fight and complain about the Western gold price suppression scheme. That country's mining industry has been declining steadily. That country is the key to saving all of Africa. If South Africa can't be saved, then Africa is going to go down the toilet. But if South Africa, which can be an industrial country, has the industrial infrastructure, can be saved and can get a fair market price for its production, then Africa can be saved. But will it? I don't know. It certainly is not going to be saved. Africa will not be saved if Africa will not stand up for Africa.
It's certainly within their power, and one wonders why they haven't, taken that power.
Larry, I think the people at the Reserve Bank of South Africa are looking to retire in Mayfair in London.
I remember just maybe 10 years ago, in South Africa, they employed something like 400,000 people in mining. Today, it's about 100,000. I'm talking about gold mining. And every one of those miners supported 10 people. So in the event, that you had, say, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 gold, turn the whole country around.
South Africa, Suriname, Mexico, Ghana are all rich countries insisting on being poor.
Incredible. Chris, this has been fascinating, and I have a lot more stuff. You're going to have to come back, but we've run out of time.
Thank you.